I have 1 day left. My Russian programmer is potentially gone. I have more than 7 features to implement. This is gonna be a hard one. I've joined the community game jam hosted by a barrage of fancy channels that I am grateful for. For the span of 1 week, more than 1,000 games were submitted for rating, and this is my experience during my first game jam. So, our team is composed of what I believe is a Russian dude named Svetlaka, who I call Svet, my close friend and composer Emanuel Segarra, and another close friend and artist named Kevin. We had another artist, but that person, well, let's just say that was our first defeat. I broke some ice by proposing a game concept, which was having a player control a drone and an unreliable narrator inform the player that they must protect the control tower from aliens. What the player doesn't know is that their video feed is being filtered inside the control tower, so what they believe to be seeing as aliens are actually humans. By the way, I got this idea from a Black Mirror episode. Finally, I created a Git repository which will be linked in the description below for you to see the source code of our game. The actual game is also linked below. I woke up and Svet had implemented the drone's movement script. That'll be the last time we see dear Svet for a while. I proceeded to begin a communication script between narrator and player. It uses the standard Undertale vibe of iterating through each character in a given string. Then I started drawing a HUD for the drone camera, and that was it. That was all we did that day. I worked on a particle system that was divided in 2 effects, a sort of flashy lines and the bullets themselves. I created a script for the bullets so that if a particle collides with an entity labeled enemy, that entity would be destroyed. Then, I implemented a camera shake while the gun was shooting by moving the position of the camera within a given amplitude. I changed the particle simulation space to worlds so that the bullets would move with respect to the world. And finally, I set the proper values for pixelated rendering. Today, nobody did shit. In order for the player to realize they actually hit the enemy, I decided to create a blood particle effect. It was here that I stumbled into an interesting problem, for when the player shoots the gun, the blood has to instantiate specifically where the bullet hit. My solution was that if a bullet hit an enemy, a ray would be casted from the player to the enemy, and this ray would then provide the normal force direction necessary to find the position to instantiate the dripping blood particle. Wow, that sounded so fancy. My next goal was to create the world, so I began modeling a building and modifying it in order to duplicate it in a scene and not have to make other models. Then, I added some sound feedback for when the player reloads and started setting up the scene with some smoke. The days of not developing had catched on. There was exactly a day and 5 hours left until the game jam was over. I have over 7 features left to implement, and Svet was nowhere to be found. I began working on the menu, utilizing an illustration our artist Kevin had provided. Then, I designed the human sprite and from it derived the alien sprite. I added the sprite to the game and used a tactic called billboard rotating to make sure the 2D sprite is always looking in front of the camera. Then I designed the tower sprite from the game's menu illustration and gave it the same billboard script. To provide the player a signal that they killed an alien, I created a terrible particle effect to kinda poof them out of the game. Then I provided another signal, but to inform the player that they'd hit the control tower. The code would quickly fade the tower to red and then return it to its original colors. In Photoshop, I made a disruption image that would pop up to inform the player that the control tower is hit either by the enemy or the player. Then, if the tower was hit in any way, I wanted the sprites of each alien to swap to the sprite of a human. Now that the control tower had a proper hit mechanic, I began working on implementing a health bar, which would be a sprite that would scale down every time the tower was hit. I developed the introductory dialogue accompanied by the in-game music created by Emmanuel Segarra and his sound effect for the text pop-up. Amazingly enough, Svet finally returned, providing us with a wave spawner system. Adding that to the game scene and an end sequence, we finished the day. I woke up early and created a simple credits for the menu. Then I implemented a terrain border that really the player could just go over it. It's a bluff. I set up a skybox with more illustrations provided by our artist Kevin. In the main menu, I added an animation and a track provided by Emmanuel. Finally, with a final build, I uploaded the game to the servers and made a dope profile for the game page. And that was it.
Are these aliens from Area 51?
Oh, I like the art now.
I like the graphics. Why is the control tower in 2D when the rest of the world is in 3D?
The response has been amazing. Some streamers have even played the game and given me amazing input and corrections for future projects. This experience truly broadened my perspective as to what I am capable of now as a game developer. Most of this game was made in 3 days really. So I asked myself now, what would happen if I choose to develop on a more long-term project? Well, that's a hint as to what's to come in the next few months. So stick around, subscribe if you like. I document my progression as a game developer and provide the tools I've used to learn. So until next time, I'm signing out.